This episode of Talk Raytown is brought to you by Nest Financial. If you don't live in the more affluent parts of town, it's hard to find a financial planner who serves as a fiduciary, someone legally bound to serve your best interest. Nest Financial is a fiduciary financial partner dedicated to serving hardworking families like you. Our founder, Josh Morales, grew up right here in the Raytown community. As a financial advisor to the ultra-wealthy, he dreamed of building a company that would serve everyday folks. Nest Financial is the fulfillment of that dream. We have a passion for education and simplification and love whatever curveball you can throw at us. Let us know how we can help. Give us a call at 816-866-3591. Check out our website at investwithnest.com. We're also on Facebook at Nest Financial KC.
And cue our music. Going right into the cut. I love it. Hey, I am Zach Sweets, and welcome back to Talk Raytown with the Raytown Chambers podcast. And I'm very excited for this conversation. And I say that every time, but honestly, having gone through the first-time homebuyer experience, that was nerve-wracking. And there was somebody that I wish I knew 2 years ago, and Jason Sneddon is a realtor and the owner of Greater KC Homes, I'll just stop there and say welcome to Talk Raytown. I know you're a long-time listener.
Absolutely.
Haven't missed an episode.
Nope.
And just had to get on an episode yourself.
I was so excited.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's jump right into it because people are not excited about these interest rates. True. And so I know that we're going to have a whole conversation about home buying, renting, but I know when folks talk about buying a home, that's the first thing that they're looking at.
Right.
And the first thing that maybe might scare them away from making it to getting into the market, might encourage them to get into the market. We know that we had record highs. We knew we had record lows. Where are we in 2024?
So right now, actually this morning, we're sitting at about 7% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. Projections are showing that it may hit very low sixes or 6% even by the end of this year, and hopefully there'll be a trend that'll keep that going downward, but it might be slow. With an election coming up, that could change things as well. So we don't really have any fine science to tell us where that's going to be, but it is hopeful that it's going to go. What I would remind everybody of is when we hit 18% in 1981. So if you can imagine being a little worried about 5, 6, 7% right now, 18%, that's a huge leap to have to bound over. So we've hit 10s, 13s over the past 20 years. I think we're in a really great spot, and what happened was some people were getting in for 2.5% just a couple of years ago. And it sounded so great, and it made such a difference on your monthly budget. When it doubles, per se, it can be a scary thing, but just a reminder of where we used to be in some of these things, and even just a few years ago, a lot higher. So I think we're in a pretty good spot. It's not much to be scared of.
When you are talking to folks, and or even just looking at some of the data yourself, what experiences are you drawing on just throughout the years of being a realtor? And kind of, you mentioned the trends, but in your personal experience, what are you thinking about whenever you hear somebody say, I don't know if I'm ready yet?
That is probably one of the most common things I'll hear. I've had some people who I've talked to several years ago looking to get into a home and just never even quite pull the trigger to have their credit pulled to see what it really sits at. I think there's this preconceived notion once you've rented for so long that it becomes part of normalcy and you don't think you can buy. Mm-hmm. My heart really goes out to those people. I used to be there once many years ago, and I'm here to say it's absolutely false. You can absolutely, you're a testimony to that. You did it yourself. So some of the things, just for an example, here in Raytown, out of all the homes, there's about 13,000 households here. I would say roughly, according to the census in 2020, about 60% of the homes here are owner-occupied. That was 4 years ago. Now, a lot of things have happened since then, but that leaves us at the point where there's about 40% of the homes here being rented by somebody. When you take into account those numbers, we also had a pandemic going on and a mass exodus, people pulling whatever they could out of their homes by selling them, and probably renting, therefore, because they couldn't really buy anything else, but they saw the numbers went high, so they sold. And that's a decent move a lot of the time. But that probably created even more rental homes. A lot of corporations were coming in and buying these places, and they were turning around renting them. So I'd say the numbers are even higher. Maybe 50% right now of the homes in Raytown could be rental properties. When you compare it to Lee Summit's sitting at about 75% home ownership. And if people would understand what programs are available and things like that, they would understand that we can actually probably get to 70-75% here in Raytown because it is affordable. So it's a good place to be in, to even be thinking about it, because it opens up all kinds of doors and possibilities to becoming a homeowner for the first time. We sold a house a couple of years ago to a couple in their 70s, never owned a home.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a joyful thing to see. So many people, their lives are changed just by simple home ownership. So it's been amazing.
Yeah, it's an emotional decision to jump in to actually buy a home. How do you counsel folks through that emotional decision? Do you try to pull back the emotion and just try to keep it on the paper, on the black and white, or how do you kind of coach people through that?
So I'm naturally just very relational, and I think it's best to let people talk it out. I'm not going to give them false hope. If they really are just freaking out about this experience, and I don't think it's going to be a good move for them emotionally, I'll be okay with them backing out, and then maybe they'll come back to the table at some point. But I think it's the healthiest thing to let people work that out and be able to talk about it. I'm not going to talk them in any other way other than to say, if this is the right move, I want you to make this move, but I'm not going to push you into something that is you're not ready for.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes some of these things can, some of the numbers can kind of help us make some of those decisions. Sure. I know in my experience, it was why not? Let's just see what this looks like. And it turned out to be close to what we were already renting for.
That's right.
And then just completely opened my eyes to home ownership in a different way. So when we're talking about entering into the market there, and we're looking at interest rates, are today's interest rates going to be our interest rates in December? If I'm looking to buy a home, should I wait for maybe a better interest rate, or is there hope that the interest rate is going to come back down?
There is hope it's going to come back down. It will just be slow. When you look at a full point coming off of the interest rate, it does make a difference on your monthly budget if you're that tight. But if you're that tight to begin with, I wouldn't suggest buying now anyway. I would say hold on, save up some more money, be able to put more down on your home. Your interest rate is going to fluctuate with your credit score as well. There's a lot of creative ways that we could do this. Negotiation skills coming from a realtor is very strong. There's potential that you could have some of your closing costs paid by the seller. The market is not as crazy as it was a couple of years ago, so there's more perks that will be coming from the seller's end. There's programs that the state of Missouri has that are programs for not just first-time buyers, but for repetitive buyers even now, where they will give you a grant of 4% to put down on a home. Now, considering if you have a FHA loan, they require typically a minimum of 3.5% down on the home. The state of Missouri will give you 4% as a grant, and you have that taken care of. Then you've got closing costs and some other things, but it cuts everything in half. Credit score requirements are fairly low, 640. You can have up to 50% debt to income ratio. You can even buy a duplex or a fourplex, live in one unit, rent the other ones out, and have the other people pay your mortgage. If you're renting, as you know very well, or maybe you don't know, you're paying someone else's mortgage, you're making them rich. If there's any one thing in life that I can't stand is making other people rich, unless they're helping me get rich too, which they're not. So,
sure. Yeah, and just kind of talking about the market as a whole, one thing I heard often is like, oh, it's a buyer's market, it's a seller's market. Where do we stand?
Yes.
Yeah. Why the yes?
We're right in the middle now. There's a lot of confusion still in the market. There was a house that I helped one of my buyers get. It's closing actually this week. The seller listed the house too high because they saw what was happening in the past and people were offering more than what the ask was. So they said, oh, I'm going to ask for an additional $50,000. So they listed it really high. It sat on the market for almost a year, which is unheard of right now. It's an amazing house in Blue Springs. And what happened is we came in, we offered $50,000 less, and they took the offer because they started too high and they were stuck in the market. People had a perception that maybe there's something wrong with the house because it was on for so long. And turned out to be really a win-win for everybody. But it was just one of those things where there's no real way to predict right now whether it's a seller's market, buyer's market. The inventory looks good, so I don't really think I would consider it leaning any one way or another. One thing I'll tell everybody, there's so many people out there saying that we're headed for a crash. We're not headed for a crash.
Yeah.
I would say maybe some areas like parts of California, New York, where it's just unattainable for anybody. Maybe there would be something happening there, but I don't see that happening here because it really is still affordable no matter where you're at in the Midwest here.
In affordability is the key word there.
Yes.
And we're seeing, like you said, some of these some of the asking prices had gone up wildly. If I'm looking to get creative, as you said, to buy a home, are there other ways to leverage assets? Let's say I have Bitcoin to buy a home.
Absolutely.
Could that be part of my down payment portfolio, if you will?
I'm not sure if any lender will accept your Bitcoin, but you could always cash it in. There's also potential for a homeowner if that's something that the seller, if that's what they're dealing with. There may be some off the side negotiations in that. I haven't ever dealt with that, and I don't think I know anybody who has. But I mean, if you think of any kind of strategies like that, there's always a possibility. If you got Bitcoin, you put $10,000 into it, now it's worth $30,000. I mean, put that bad boy on a house.
Yeah. What are some other creative just ways to get to closing that you've seen or been a part of?
Really, it has a lot to do with negotiation. It really does, and that's why, as realtors, we go through strenuous testing and requirements that we have to hold up to and qualifications, so we can be smart in negotiating terms of the loan. If you come into a house that has horrible carpet, you can negotiate back for carpet replacement or carpet allowance before you move in. Closing cost help. There's just so many different avenues. Some other things you could do, you could have the seller pay for a home warranty for the first year of your home. That way, if anything goes wrong, you've got a call that may cost you $75 for them to come out, but they'll likely fix whatever is happening in the home, and that will not just save you right off the top, it'll save you for that next year, and if you want to keep going, you can keep it too. As
you kind of talked about the rate of home ownership versus the rate of renting in Raytown, if you had to just look into your realtor crystal ball, which, by the way, sees well into the future, 100 years, and you can tell us what that's going to cost, what does Raytown look like, say, even in 5 years, perhaps 10 years, on that, just looking at that ratio?
I say there's a lot of unique opportunity in Raytown. So we're positioned really close to the stadiums where FIFA soccer is going to be here in 2026. It's a couple of minute drive right up the road, and there's going to be thousands and thousands of people driving through Raytown who never realized Raytown before, and it's a unique opportunity for somebody to come in and buy in Raytown now, wait for the property to maybe slowly, incrementally increase in value, and there could be something amazing that happens after that with the property values, depending on what people realize in this area that have never been here before.
And what does homeownership really mean to a community? I can say that if someone buys a home, they have a home, and that's great for them. But what does it mean on a broader scale whenever you see a healthy renting to homeownership? There's nothing disparaging about renting. I didn't even know that I could buy a home until I did know. But what does homeownership mean to a community?
So what I will say a lot of the time is if you've been renting for years and years and you don't even think about the possibility of buying anymore. A lot of people have that dream, but they just start renting, and that's part of life. It develops a level of apathy. Apathy is the opposite of concern or care. You've heard the term pride of ownership. It really produces an element of pride. It changes the community when you can remove apathy from a community, and just the outlook on life. I have seen people's permanent facial expression change to positive the moment they got the keys in their hand and they walk in the house for the first time. It really changes. It changes everything. It will make such a huge difference. But beyond the person, it'll make a difference in the community because the attitude, the way you feel about yourself, the way you feel about what you now own. And when you're renting, you're kind of at the mercy of someone else. If your toilet clogs and you can't do it yourself, what do you have to do? You have to call the landlord, homeowner. You're not going to go out and buy a snake at Sutherland's and try and do it yourself because you're not the homeowner. You're not going to put that kind of money into it if you don't need to. So you're either stuck doing that if you got a bad landlord, or you're just stuck waiting for when they get around to it. If you own your home, first of all, you're likely paying less on your mortgage than you would be for rent. So you're saving some money there. But it is, it's almost a good feel to be able to go to the store and say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to fix my clogged toilet and I'm going to do it myself. There's a pride of ownership. It doesn't hurt to do it. It feels good that you're able to actually do it yourself.
Well, I'm sure the folks at Sutherland's likes to see folks like me that have to go back a second and third time to finish that home project, and I'm just unclogging a toilet. Right. But when we're looking at on the flip side the disadvantages of home ownership, you kind of already started, or excuse me, of renting. You started to kind of mention, so it just varies on who owns the property and your experience, and talk a little bit more about the financial part of that, of that money's not going to you, that money's going to someone else. What is that, you talk about that difference for that future homeowner. What does that mean for that person today thinking, should I consider buying a home?
I would put it this way, and I had kind of an epiphany on my own about 20 years ago. And I look back and I'm renting. There was a house I was in for 5 years straight renting, and at the time it was $1,300. And I multiplied 13 times 60, the 60 months I had been there. And I can't do the math right now, but it doesn't matter because it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I had absolutely nothing to show for it. And I think about even a car payment I was making. I've got something to show for it. I'm going to eventually own that car. But to be paying someone else's mortgage thousands of dollars out of pocket when I could have used that as a down payment on a home, or anything for that matter that I could hold in my hand that's tangible. I started looking at that as just money I'm throwing away, and sure, I've got a shelter over my head. But in the long run, lease is up, I'm out, I've got nothing to show for it.
What, to that point of like what I have to show for it, I think a lot of folks in Raytown, a lot of folks in Jackson County had something to show for it with the tax assessment. Yes. And you got to pay your tax bill on your home. How was Raytown impacted from your perspective and what you've been able to see from that? And I know we're coming up on another assessment cycle.
So Raytown was actually affected greatly. A lot of those homes that were reassessed at a much higher amount that they needed to be were owned by elderly people who were on a fixed income. So when you talk about taxes that are $2,000 a year and all of a sudden they're doubling to $4,000, that is a lot of money for some people. My house more than doubled. So if you can imagine what that looks like, but I went to the county who fought it and they knocked it back down. But there's a lot of people that are suffering because of it. Those kind of things, as a homeowner, we need to be very watchful for. When we see it coming, when we hear the chatter in the background, the county is doubling our taxes. A lot of people don't always look at their bill. They don't think about it. But open your mail, think about it, talk to somebody, whether it's a real estate professional, financial professional, and see what the things are that you can do to keep that from hitting you directly.
The other side of what you've been talking about is that there are ways for folks to get into homes. Yes. For one, was very fortunate to have my financial institution offer a first-time home buyer program that actually covered closing costs and another portion of something,
Right.
Another chunk of money that you would need upfront cash for. What are some of programs available that you know of for folks right now that people could leverage to get into their first home or a home in general?
I'd say the most valuable one is what the Missouri Housing Development Commission has right now. They've got 2 different grants. I touched on it a little bit. It's a grant. It goes towards your mortgage. So if you've got it, they give you 4%. If you're buying a house, it's just like $100,000. I know that it doesn't exist anymore around here, but it's going to cost you anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 in closing costs and down payment to get into that house. That 4% grant takes care of $4,000 of that right off the top. And you might hear some people say, well, it's not really a grant because, they tag it on to your mortgage, and kind of, yes. But if you live in that home for 10 years, it's free money. If let's say you sell your house before the 10 years, you have to pay whatever the prorated amount is back. But generally, if you sell your house in a few years, you're selling it to pull some money out of it, to get some extra money out of it. That's not going to be a big hit. The credit requirements aren't bad. The debt-to-income ratio is not bad. There's just so many advantages to it. And like I said before, I'm a major proponent of telling people, if you haven't bought before and you've been renting, buy a duplex or buy a fourplex. Live in one. Let someone else pay your bills for once. And just watch what that does. And you'll not just be a homeowner, you're going to be a real estate investor at that point.
Yeah, the other side of that too is, there is a lending component. Would you recommend that folks, I'll just go to the first bank I know, or is it okay to ask around on what financial institutions have to offer?
You should absolutely ask around. I think what I would tell people to do is check your credit first, know where you stand, and I don't mean just check it on Credit Karma. Check your actual FICO score, because that's what the banks go for. Then maybe engage a real estate agent, a realtor, and see if they've got some suggestions. Personally, I use 7 or 8 different companies for that, and depending on the situation, I can direct somebody in the right place depending on what their credit is, what they're looking to buy, the amount of the loan, and everything else. So start with your credit, see what it's looking like, and definitely ask around, without a doubt.
Let's just pivot slightly. Tell me about the housing stock in Raytown. Is it aging, or is Raytown potentially in need of more roofs to be constructed, or does it have great infrastructure and great homes that have been built fairly recently that folks can move into for another few decades?
The homes in Raytown have been built very good. I don't know any other way to put it. There's some homes here that are from the very early 1900s. Mm-hmm. There's some fairly recent builds, or I guess you could say rebuilds. Raytown is uniquely positioned where it's built already. So there's not any real new construction that I'm aware of, at least. But there is a lot of care that's been taken into these homes. People have taken good care of the homes and kept them in good shape. So everybody talks about the bones of a home. This is kind of the place to find it, and that's also what inspections are for when you're buying a home. But there's some homes, I think, or there may be some homes that are like 10, 15 years old here. My home was built in 1971. I got another 50 to 100 years with it minimum. It's going to outlast me for sure, as long as it's taken care of, and there's a lot of that here.
Well, thanks for taking care of Raytown and the folks looking to buy a home, and taking care of Talk Raytown as we all kind of learn up. Like I said, I wish 2 years ago I had this conversation or heard this conversation, because there's so much unknown, and there's a lot of, regardless of interest rates, it's like I said before, it's emotional. There's some fear if you've never been in this space before, and so it's always good to get a few tricks of the trade from somebody who knows.
Absolutely.
So, is there anything else from your experience that maybe I didn't get to that you're like, people need to know this?
If you have an opportunity to buy a home, if you've ran your credit and you've talked to an agent and you're ready to go with a lender, don't jump on the first home. The market is not as crazy as it was a couple of years ago, where there's 20, 30 offers on one house. The houses are staying on the market for a normal amount of time now, and there's opportunities out there. And maybe a house that you really like will get sold from underneath you if you wait too long on it, but there's going to be more. So if you fall in love with something and you just want to get it, look at some other ones. Take the day even to look at some other ones and compare it. You might find another one you love, but don't jump on a whim with it. If you know you're ready to go, find a house that's really going to work for you, that is going to be, think of it as a forever home. Think of it as something you would want to keep forever.
Absolutely. And on that forever home note, my realtor, while I was all googly-eyed at the thing I thought I wanted in a home, she said, "I don't know, guys," and she was looking at the things that we didn't look for. So
right.
What should people, when they're looking, you did mention that they're, that's what the home inspection's for, but just to the naked eye home buyer, when you find something maybe you do like, where are some areas you should look up? I should look at the door frames. Should I be extra, vigilant when I go to the basement? What are things that you look for when you're doing a walkthrough with a client?
So the first thing we do when we pull up to a home, you can tell a lot about the home just by what the outside looks like. If the grass is overgrown, if the paint's peeling, if it's missing some shingles, if the roof looks old, if there's broken windows, that means they are probably not taking care of the inside as well as the outside. Then again, a lot of people focus on the inside of their home because that's where they live, and sometimes the outside suffers. Either way, when you've got paint peeling and maybe wood rot and things like that, it's costly. And use your head when you go and look at a house. Say, would I want to have to repaint this thing? Would I want to have to do that kind of yard work and clean up just to get it looking nice? Maybe you do. And that's a great place to be. But just be very intentional in pulling up and really assessing this thing for the first time as you walk up to it. If it looks beautiful on the outside, that's amazing. That's a great start. Walk in, see how the doors line up, see if there's any cracks above the doorways, the openings. That is a sign of settling in the foundation. Look for cracks in the foundation walls in the basement. That's usually the most costly thing you can find in a home next to a roof. So do all those things. Make sure you do your own due diligence, and just look for the condition of the home. A lot of people end up getting a really sweet deal on homes that are in great shape but really outdated. That is a turnoff for a lot of people, so they generally have a lower price if it hasn't been updated since the 70s, because it's not attractive. But there's things you can do that are fairly cost effective to make that house look a lot better without rebuilding on the inside.
That's key. That is something that I learned after several walkthroughs. And would you believe it? My wife found a home that was bright blue, and I said, "I'll never live there." Guess what we moved into? So, thank you, Jason, for joining Talk Raytown here at Gnarly Hustle in the Foolish Club podcast studio. The next opportunity to talk to Jason will be on June 6th at the Raytown Chambers After Hours event. And so be ready. I know everyone who shows up to that event will hear this episode. So I hope you have a notepad and plenty of business cards to be able to answer some questions. So thank you, Jason, again. And thanks to you for listening to Talk Raytown. I guess I'm your host. That's what I'm here for. Zach Sweets, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.